So my spirit left my flesh man, my body, went up into the roof of this garage, and I'm looking down, looking at the accident scene. And if you can imagine, like if this table was that truck, I'm looking down at the front, looking down at the front bumper at an angle like this. I can see that my head is sticking out. I remember my eyes were closed and my head was actually turned to the driver's side. The man I've been working with was on his knees above me, running his fingers through my hair, crying because he had jacked up and not blocked it.
The guilt that he was feeling.
And I'd known the guy since I was 12 years old.
Sure. Yeah.
So, so there was a relationship there besides.
Sure.
And he's saying, I'm sorry, and he's crying and saying stuff like, I should be the one that's dead, not you. But, so the out-of-body experience was incredible, but that wasn't the most incredible thing.
Sure.
The incredible thing was the
title
of the book,
right.
Saved by Angels. When I called it God Help Me, he sent these two angels, obviously. And there they were, and I could see them perfectly as I'm looking down on each side of my body. If you can imagine now, the front of this, it's a conventional long-nose truck.
Yes.
He'd shut the hood, so I'm looking at this big grill, the big chrome bumper, the headlights. My head is sticking out. He's on his knees, running his fingers through my hair. I'm looking down an angle over the top of his right shoulder to see my head. And on each side of us both were these angels, also on their knees. But if he's 6'1", 6'2", their heads stuck up
way above,
way above his head. So again, I say, like, if they were standing up, they had to be probably 8 feet tall.
Amazing.
Really broad shoulders. I mean, big, tough, buff guys. I couldn't see their face because I'm looking at their back.
Buff angels.
Yeah, I'm looking down. I joke and say special forces angels,
Right.
Yeah.
I'm looking down, so I'm looking at their back, and they were facing me, so I never got to see their face. But I could tell just by their body shape, they were obviously huge men.
Sure.
They didn't have wings. They were wearing robes. Even as you had mentioned, you picked up in the book, the detail,
the material
of what I saw from even at that distance.
Yeah.
I could tell that the robes were made out of a unique material, something that you don't see people wear. It was woven out of just a plain, simple cross-weave pattern, but it was woven out of like a small rope, like a miniature rope, maybe a little smaller than your finger. And it didn't look comfortable, but it looked very durable, very tough.
Yeah.
About the spot where their belt went, which is a little bit higher on a robe than it would be like on pants. Right about there is where their hair ended. So they had really long hair. They were guys with really long hair, and which is interests me. Yeah. What interests me is that when I go around and tell this story to people or read other books and sense the accidents happen, people tell me about these angels that they saw, and it's amazing that 9 out of 10 always mention the really long hair that these men have.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's the ones I saw had curly, long blonde hair. And I've had people say, I saw those exact angels, curly, long, blonde hair. But I've had people say curly, long, black hair, curly, long, red hair. So I think it's interesting. God's angels are like us. You've got blonde hair, you've got dark hair.
Created by Him.
Exactly. So they're all unique.
Yeah, right.
Politically correct.
The creator that we have that has this diverse creation.
Right.
These two angels were identical. They were matching bookends.
Twins.
I mean, their body, they were.
Just like you have.
Yeah, and I've got twin boys too.
You have twin boys, that's right.
Yeah, so these angels were twins. They were matching, identical. And they had their arms, and if you can imagine that chrome bumper, they had their arms up underneath, out of sight, angled in towards my body. And that's like the first image that's like just totally burned in my head. They were not moving. There was a glow, just a light emanating off of both of them. That was, in fact, the light was bright enough that it was hard to tell if their robes were made out of, if the robes were like white or yellow, because the yellow, it was kind of a yellowish light.
Sure.
So it was like, is it an ivory robe or a white robe?
Yeah. Well, we were talking earlier how God uses ordinary people to make an impact in our world. And with Kim and myself, we humble ourselves to that. And I know you had said the same thing. You, an ordinary person, a mechanic, who God has just spoke to, and you have this discerning ear to hear Him speak. And so this is just the beginning, right, of what He's doing now in your life and how He's using this experience in a powerful way. And we talked also earlier that we all recognize that God is not locked into the cover, between the covers of the Bible.
Right.
And your story sharing this about His angels being sent, He's the same today as He was thousands of years ago and 2,000 years ago when Christ was on the earth. So there's more to your story beyond that with going to the hospital, right?
Yeah, well,
and you should have really bled out, you said, right, in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, what we found out now is that doctors can't find anybody else anywhere in the world that's ever lived from the injuries I had, because on my left side, your heart is on your left side, and I was crushed so thin on that side. I had, in 5 places, major arteries severed not just torn, not pinched, but completely severed. So they said I should have bled out internally in just a few minutes.
Yeah.
Some doctors 8 to 10 minutes, like 10 minutes absolutely max. And it was 2 hours and 40 minutes from the point of the accident until they operated on me. And again, some things happened that stretched the time out. And again, it was just God making sure that that would happen so that he could put exclamation points on the end of this miracle, because UCLA out in California did a study we found. And it was actually when the 700 Club was doing my medical research for my story for them. They pointed this out to us. We didn't know that before, but UCLA had done the study. They'd taken 30 years of data from every major trauma center that they could get data from around the world. And they had done this study and looked at people having midsection, torso section trauma to arteries. Because if it's, if it's your arm or your leg, you can put a tourniquet on it and stop the bleeding. But if it's in your midsection, you can't. And so it's like 100% mortality rate, except for me. And they've got this whole grading scale, for the severity of your injury. And as far as their scale, I'm maxed out at the very top because it was five places. And there's nobody else that they can find in that study or elsewhere that anybody's been able to locate that's ever lived. So that's first and foremost miracle number one. Miracle number two is, as you mentioned, takes a little while for that to happen, a few months. Because I was crushed so thin in my center section, my small intestine got damaged. An adult has between 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 feet of small intestine, depending on the body. And I was down to less than 3 feet. And so in February, the accident happened in November. In February of '07, another chunk of what I did have left died. It was something they had tried to use because it was such a critical number. They wanted to get as much small intestine back in there as they could. And so a piece they used that was maybe a little questionable died. And so they had to go back in, cut me open again, and remove that section. So now I'm, again, like I said, below the 3 feet. And basically I'm starving to death at that point. I'd gone from 185, 190 pounds to like 125, 126 pounds in February. So you can see I'm a huge weight loss in a little bit of time.
Basically starving to death.
And somebody had come in and told my wife and I that I had roughly a year to live at that point. Because I'm starving to death. And they're feeding me intravenously, but they can't mimic what God does long term. Basically what God does in the small intestine, they can't mimic it intravenously long term. And so this man got woken up, Bruce Carlson, somebody I had met one time on vacation out in New York. Lord woke him up 2 mornings in a row and told him, buy a plane ticket, fly to Wisconsin and pray for me. I was on the prayer chain at his church because his pastor was my old pastor. And so
we see God's hand orchestrating everything again. It's just so amazing, isn't it?
Exactly.